Good afternoon and welcome to Digital Catapult's Construction Reimagined webinar that we are running in partnership with UK Green Building Council as well. So my name is Emily Savage. I am the head of immersive from the commercial partnerships point of view at Digital Catapult. And today I'm going to be joined by a whole host of absolute experts in the construction and real estate industry to talk through a little bit more as to how they are using advanced digital technology, specifically immersive and XR technology, to move this particular industry forwards in the UK and to start tackling digital transformation. So over the next hour and a half, we are going to hear from a whole range of people. Firstly, Lucy Rees from the Sustainability, who's the Sustainability Advisor at UK Green Building Council, is going to tell us a little bit more about what they get up to and some of the innovation work they're working on. And then we'll be joined by Sukhmeet Singh, who is the Digital Solutions Lead at Atkins, who is going to talk us through a little bit more how they're using immersive and XR technologies from the design point of view, so right at the beginning of that building cycle. Then we'll be jumping over to Sam Watts, who's the Immersive Partnerships Director at Make Real, and he will be talking a lot more about how the technology is being used to upskill and retrain and bring lots of new, fresh talent into the industry. And then Mark Enzer, the CTO of Mott MacDonald, will be wrapping us up to talk a lot more about how they have been using it from that build phase, so on construction sites and moving into the world of digital twins. So lots and lots of experts coming in the next hour and a half, and we will be finishing with a panel discussion where Lucy will be talking a little bit more personally with the three speakers to tackle some of the big questions. Now, right at the end, there will be time as well for some of your questions. So please, if you have questions that you want to pop in, do pop them in to the Q&A function. Equally, just so you're all aware, this is being recorded and it will be shared afterwards. The slides and all of the audio recording will be shared. And at the very end, just to wrap us up, my colleague, David Pugh, who's head of sustainability, will just be giving a few closing remarks as well. So let me first of all just say a little bit more about Digital Catapult, who we are and why we have organized this event this afternoon. So first of all, Digital Catapult. So our role, you may well have heard of us, but our role is very much to accelerate the adoption within industry of advanced digital technologies, ultimately with the goal of driving growth within the UK economy of the advanced digital technology areas. And really what that means it means that we are there to try and break down the barriers for industry. So we want to make it as easy as possible and de-risk innovation. So it doesn't feel like a big, scary leap into the dark, but instead we're there to guide you, to bring in expertise and to open up the wonderful world of the startup and talent network here in the UK. Ultimately, sorry, let me just shut some of my windows. There we go. So ultimately, we sit in a very special position as Digital Catapult. So we interact with all of the different organizations in the UK that are required to move technology innovation forwards. And that means everyone from interacting with government and working on policy, right the way through to working with academia, startups, and then of course, industry themselves. And this means that we are a neutral advisor. And we have two target industry areas. One of those is the creative industries, and that includes everything from advertising right the way through to film and TV. And then on the other side, and more linked to what we're talking about today, is the manufacturing industries. And again, it's very broad, from supply chain through to aerospace, through to construction. So the expertise that we have and the areas that we really look at fundamentally fall into the 4 or 5 different categories that you see along the bottom of your screen. So we have expert technologists across future networks, immersive technology, artificial intelligence, distributed ledger technology, which includes blockchain, and then more and more so as we move into the future, quantum technologies as well. And you can see that we apply those technical knowledge areas into a few fundamental overarching streams of technology applications, so virtualization, digital and resilient supply chains, and then open interoperable digital infrastructures, such as what we see with the building out of advanced networks. We are based all over the country. Our head office is here in London, where I am today, in Euston Road, but we equally have facilities dotted all over, from Northern Ireland through to Northeast Tees Valley, and then partnership facilities in lots of other regions as well. So just to wrap up, really, this is a snapshot of what makes Digital Catapult special. So as I say, we have lots of expert technologists in-house across all of those advanced areas that are there to work on R&D and innovation projects. We have a digital design and innovation practitioners that sit within here and are ready to help organizations with that journey. We then have this huge network of startups, probably one of the biggest in the UK, of ideas, knowledge, and ways to tackle innovation all at our fingertips. And then we're able to deliver innovation projects and build proof of concepts for industry. And it's also worth mentioning that we have a number of high-tech facilities, and they include virtual production studios, as well as 5G test beds, along with many other types. So I will leave it there, because now I want to hand over to some of the real experts in the room. So without further ado, Lucy, if you could please come on screen, and I will allow you to just say a few more words about the UK Green Building Council. Thank you so much. I will just stop sharing and you have the floor.
Thank you, Emily, for the introduction. And hello, everyone. So my name is Lucy Rees. I am a sustainability advisor for the UK Green Building Council. And in my role, I lead our work on innovation and sustainability solutions. So for those who don't know us, the UKGBC is a not-for-profit member organisation, and we have just reached over 650 organisations within this membership who are all aligning with us and our mission to radically transform the sustainability of the built environment. And I have the pleasure of introducing today's event and chairing the panel discussion later, thanks to the brilliant links between Digital Catapult's work that we've just heard about and our own. We are both really focused on helping to advance and scale the adoption of innovative solutions, which for UKGBC centres around really getting to grips with the sustainability challenges faced by the built environment sector, and then helping to source, profile, and accelerate the uptake of solutions to those challenges. So when it comes to digital technologies, be that the Internet of Things, smart devices, AI, AR, VR, all the acronyms, we are seeing these really start to transform industries across the globe, and also the way that we just as individuals live our lives. But the construction industry has notoriously lagged a little in embracing this wave of innovation. And especially in the face of climate-related challenges across the built environment, be that the need to mitigate our continued impact on climate or to adapt and become more resilient to the changes that we're already seeing, the opportunities that are there and that are offered by extended reality applications are huge. And we'll be hearing more today from our panelists about some of the practical real-world examples of these applications and how they're beginning to disrupt the construction industry to drive sustainable and efficient outcomes, but also what the opportunities there are out there to expand this and even further to support net zero goals across the industry. What I'm really keen to dig a little deeper into as well in our panel discussion are the challenges associated with this, to learn about what's slowing down the construction industry at the moment in adopting innovative technologies, and to find out how our speakers think we can encourage greater and faster uptake of innovation across the industry. So at UKGBC, this is a big focus of our solutions and innovation programme. Within our membership, we've now got nearing 50 startup companies, which include a wide range of really purpose-driven digital technology companies that are looking to scale in the market. And through our work, we're actively bringing them together, not only with each other, but also with UKGBC's wider corporate membership. And we do this through regular, dedicated networking and knowledge sharing events, within which we're looking to unravel some of the barriers and enablers to innovation adoption across the built environment. And we really strongly believe that it's only by facilitating knowledge sharing across the value chain in this way, and also through sharing those insights more widely through events like today's, that we can start to break down some of the silos that have historically held us back as an industry. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to today's speakers to hear their take on how we can strengthen the UK construction sector through the power of extended reality.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Lucy. Thanks ever so much for that. And we're really pleased to have you here and hosting the panel later on as well. So as mentioned, let me just make sure I'm sharing screen again. Our first speaker from industry for the day is Sukhmit Singh Chagga, who is with Atkins as the lead digital solution focusing on infrastructure. So today, Sukhmit is going to be able to tell us a little bit more about how they've been using some of these advanced technologies to help with the design phase within construction.
Brilliant. No, thank you very much for the introductions. Yes, as Emily was saying, we're just going to touch on and explore a bit more the use of XR and immersive technologies in the design phase of the building lifecycle. Just want to begin with a bit of an introduction for those who may not be aware of Atkins. We're a member of the S&C Labeling Group. We're at the moment 50,000 strong across the globe, with approximately 12,000 across Europe, with a quite a broad spectrum of capabilities ranging from consultancy to digital to design engineering to operations and maintenance. So quite a broad spectrum. And what this allows us to do is not only look at the design phase of the built environment, but also spread across all these sort of different aspects and bring them all together and really understand where we can add value and use technology to add value to what we're doing and what we're delivering for our clients. Myself, I'm a digital solutions lead within the infrastructure business. I've got a focus on the design of buildings, so very much focused around how we can bring new technology, new ways of working to our design teams so that they can be more innovative, creative, and efficient in what they do and how they deliver. And one of the ways we have done that is by looking at the use of XR and immersive technologies to really drive a new way of working and a new standard of working within our design teams. So where we'll focus in on today is there's a lot we can sort of touch on that XR and immersive tech can play a part with, but the main sort of focus areas for today will be around stakeholder engagement, design support and design reviews for myself, as well as how we're using data as a bit of an underlay and a foundation to actually take a lot of this technology beyond just being able to see visualizations and really improve the way the level of information that is being generated and shared with different end users. So starting off on stakeholder engagement. So this has always been an interesting one, where traditionally we would previously use lifelike renders, we would use headsets to try and get the clients or the stakeholders into the room and essentially show them their building or show them their project. But where we started really seeing a lot more value was the use of AR, augmented reality. And this was because one of the increased accessibility. It meant that the stakeholders, the users weren't limited to having to wear headsets. They could use their smartphones, their tablets to interact with these installations or with these elements. And then what we could also do is take them beyond just those 3D visuals and renders. Through the use of QR codes and other markers, we're able to showcase what lies underneath certain graphics. And where we've actually seen a great success in this actually with interacting with children at schools or during STEM activities, where once again it's not always possible to have them wearing headsets, and what we can do is provide them with tablets where they can interact with characters, where they can interact with other imagery, and understand more around what's going on, why you're making certain decisions and how it's going to impact them. And it becomes more of a tool of a conversation rather than a one-way, oh, this looks good and I like it, but more of a actually what's the level of depth of information that's sitting behind the graphics and sitting behind some of the design decisions that we may have made, and how we can connect those to the students, to the faculty, to other users of the buildings and the projects. So it has become quite a game changer, and it is something that we're keen to keep doing and keep pushing the boundaries on. In terms of, at the moment, there's a few limitations in terms of scale, in terms of how large or how interactive we can make these augmented reality overlays. But with some of the breakthroughs that we're seeing come out of like Google and other sort of tech providers, there's a whole load more potential in terms of how we can really change the way we engage with our stakeholders and change the way that we get them to interact with our designs and with our proposals, and be able to capture what they're thinking about it as well. So it's moving on to design support. This is where we're seeing more of the virtual reality element come into it. And once again, it's about collaboration, it's about bringing in different perspectives. It's around integration into the workflows. So one of the tools that we're currently exploring and experimenting with is Archeo, where you've got a multi-user VR experience, but that is not limited to the virtual reality headsets. You can also be a user via a tablet, via a desktop machine, and it means that we're not limited in terms of who can interact with the designs and who can start playing with these shapes and design ideas. And once again, it means that we can get different perspectives in terms of being able to fly around, being able to see what's going on and how best to make collective decisions, informed decisions, based on what we're seeing in this virtual reality space. So just building on that as well, what it's allowing us to do is also bring in other data overlays. So normally we would maybe just use AutoCAD and layers of information or SketchUp. But what we're really able to do now is bring in geospatial data, socioeconomic data, and get that visualized alongside the building, so that actually we're not just looking at the building and its site context, we're also trying to understand the people around it and how they could interact with the building, how they would walk around the building, and start making, once again, these data-driven, evidence-based decisions so that we know we're really making the right choice. Where we've also started experimenting with this as well is around looking at how we can bring in other data sets, such as from certain analysis, so things like daylighting, wind analysis. How do we bring that into the VR environment so that we are truly immersed in that experience and can very much understand what is going on and what impact our new design may have on itself, as well as the people around it, as well as the other buildings around it as well. And this is where we really want to get to, is so that we have this focus on user centricity, and we really think about the person who's going to be walking around the building, walking into the building, and what experience are they going to be seeing, and trying to represent that in this digital realm, within the virtual reality realm. Just moving on from sort of design support into design review. We often see a crossover between design and construction, and even during the design process as well, there's this continuous feedback loop that we want to create, and be able to leverage the cutting edge technology in terms of how we want it to move forward, how we want it to impact our decisions, and how it integrates into our workflows. So with our design reviews, it's a case of being able to author our designs in certain applications, bring that into virtual reality, and as I was mentioning earlier, being able to bring in different overlays of data. So whether that could be Google Images and satellite views, whether it could be OpenStreetMap and some of the site context around that, and also being able to then interact with it, not just from a modeling perspective, but from a comments and a communication perspective. So being able to mark up in these environments, being able to draw in these environments and actually share that visualization to ask questions of the design, ask whether it's the right decision that we've made in terms of certain heights or certain placements, and making sure that we're not just seeing this in a 2D realm on a PDF drawing, for example, and we're not just flying around a 3D model with not much aim and with not much context around it, but really bringing in those layers of information that can definitely change our decision-making process and change the way that and change what that end result will look like from a building perspective. And it gives us this ability overall that it's, as we're going through the process of stakeholder engagement, design reviews, design support using VR technology, we can really see a story and a narrative forming in terms of our decisions. And it means that we can use the technology to capture this. What this leads on to is this final sort of bit around the technology and the data that actually sits beneath all of this. So one aspect is the visualization and being able to model, comment and the likes, but a key element of this is really around data collection. So one of the things that we've been experimenting and been putting into play over the last couple of years is how can we simulate different scenarios and typologies, use this to understand user experience, and then being able to record this and integrate it into our analysis. So an example of this is that we ran on some of our own offices was changing certain aspects of our office layout. So whether that was around the desks, the lighting, or certain positioning of certain furniture, to capture that feedback of how would a user feel about this? So making sure that they feel immersed into that environment, making them feel like they've got a connection to that environment. And rather than asking a plain question on paper or as part of a conversation, it's more about asking a question while they are experiencing that space. And that really changes their perception of what they want and what they feel they need out of that space. And it also changes the way we engage, because it becomes a data-driven approach rather than around narratives, which then means we can actually incorporate that into our design brief, we can incorporate that into our analysis and really understand the impact of what's going to happen. As I was mentioning earlier, we also are looking at how we can bring in different sensory elements to this as well now. So that is there a way we can start to represent touch and airflow and noise. So once again, we just want to be able to build on this level of immersion so that we can use all of our senses and use as many data points to make sure that we're making the right decisions in the right way, and in the end to deliver better buildings for everyone on this call and beyond that as well, so that every building has a purpose and has put the end user and their user experience at the forefront of the design. So that's covering, from my perspective, the design phase and how we're using immersive technologies and XR. So thank you very much.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Sugmit. That's just really informative to look at it from those different stages and actually what the technology allows you to kind of shine a light on that you previously wouldn't ever really get the chance to consider in terms of data. So absolutely brilliant. I'm going to quite quickly hand over now and introduce Sam Watts, who is the Immersive Partnerships Director at Make Real. He's going to share more about how they're using this technology to really bring more people into the sector and allow that kind of safe training to take place. So Sam, if you bring yourself onto video as well, please.
I am on video.
You're there. Excellent. I will stop sharing and then I'll be able to see that. Wonderful. All
Lovely.
right. The stage is all yours, Sam. Thank you ever so much.
Great. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can see my screen there. My name's Sam Watts. I am the Immersive Partnerships Director of Make Real. We are a immersive content studio SME based in Brighton. My job is to do many things like this, evangelizing and educating people around the potential benefits and use cases of immersive technologies. So it's a pleasure today to be here to talk about how we use them within the built environment. I've been on a journey for the best part of past 10 years at the start of the current sort of fourth wave of the re-emergence of VR. I have to remember VR isn't anything new. exploring to understand how we could turn it into a viable business, but also how the technology could improve and enhance a range of sectors. I've tried pretty much every single headset that's been available since 2012, from AR to VR to mixed reality and everything else that crosses into XR within. As a result, I was last called the 12th most influential person in VR in the world, which amused me a little bit, rated higher than the people who are actually making the hardware. But I will happily talk about XR until the cows come home. But you know, as with the pandemic, we've seen talking only goes so far. And whilst this talk is fantastic, I do highly recommend everybody tries and actually goes to get their head into a headset. The studio itself, we have a background of e-learning. Many of our designers come from the traditional side and are exploring how immersive technologies improve training, looking specifically at those new ways to encounter and improve learning outcomes. And then the other sectors are games, immersives, more of the broadcast side of things, but then the high-end flight simulation side of things. And it's these four strands of work that really sort of pulls together to create these unique opportunities for many of our clients and our products. Now, we've deployed over 100 different immersive experiences. Most of these are enterprise-focused training experiences. Our moniker is serious fun, so it's about 70% enterprise, and we've worked across a range of sectors. And we wrap AEC, energy, utilities, telco, etc., all within the built environment sort of overall label. Now, some of these experiences are available within the Digital Catapult Immersive Lab, so I think there are ways that you could try and get in to use them. So I'm going to be talking about training and upskilling. It's a big focus at the moment, obviously post-pandemic. There's a lot of job opportunities out there. There's a lot of people looking around to change profession. And there's some professions that have just been decimated in terms of people desiring to work within them, or just having to continue, and how we attract the future workforces. So some of the common problems with training, typically a lot of it is given by PowerPoint. It doesn't perhaps provide to be particularly engaging content. Quite often, we live in a 3D world or a 4D world, and a lot of this content is 2D, so there's not a lot of correlation. There's poor data retention. The studies show that when we're watching TV, for example, we have a 30-second short-term memory. When we're training by video, we're constantly taking in that new information. We don't have time to process it and put it into our longer-term memory storage. So that is potentially okay for immediate assessment, but for that longer-term data recall and ensuring that people are still following what they've learned, the traditional methods typically struggle. A lot of it is theoretical, especially when we're talking about built environment work. A lot of it is practical orientated. And if we are getting practical with real-world assets, this can cost a lot of money to stop operations, to take big assets out of work. They are there, cranes are there, diggers are there, etc., to be doing a job. They're often being hired or rented for a particular set of time. They can't be in a maintenance yard with people crawling all over them. They need to be out there generating revenue or being used efficiently. Similarly, access to these assets is problematic, arranging people to travel around the country, etc. So there's been a lot of talk over the years in terms of some of the benefits of immersive technologies. There's a lot of high-level bite-sized snapshots in terms of the benefits. But overall, we talk about things like it's learning by doing. So you're actually building up that muscle memory. You're actually doing the job. You're repeating those steps to get it right. You have levels of immersion and presence. I'll save you from the technical details in terms of how we quantify these, but by taking people out of a site hut or out of a classroom and making them believe that they are genuinely on a site within the real space, they react and they behave accordingly, and they will respond more effectively based upon what they have learned. A lot of that can be taken from that theoretical and putting it into practice. And from that, with a more sort of digital society and the future workforce sort of growing up with mobile phones and internet, touchscreens, etc., and the gaming, over 52% of people see themselves as gamers. It's about greater engagement, but also creating greater memories and that data retention. The science shows that the more senses that are engaged during learning, then the deeper those form the memories. And whilst currently some of the research shows that assessment straight away after immersive training doesn't necessarily score any better than traditional forms, it's 6 months, a year's time later down the line when you're reassessing people that they've still gained that knowledge and awareness and understanding of what it is that the topic is at hand. But more importantly, you're allowing people to train and fail safely, so that you're not putting people at risk untrained on site. You're not putting the production development process at risk. You're not putting financial risk, and you're not putting humans at risk. They can fail safely virtually and see the repercussions and outcomes of their actions. And ultimately, it helps reduce some cost and impact of operations because you're not having to take these assets out of action. Now, the hype around immersive technology has certainly died down over these past few years, but there's been a number of wide-ranging statements around it. But it's very important to always highlight what it is and isn't. Immersive technology isn't a magic bullet. It isn't going to answer all your prayers. It isn't going to suddenly make your trainees or apprentices suddenly, wonder kids in terms of their understanding and their scores. It's about validating and ensuring that you're applying the use case effectively. We have a number of companies who come to us saying they want VR, but they don't know why. And that's always our first question. What are the current problems or barriers to learning or assessment? Where are the holes in your assessment or the learning outcomes? Where are people consistently failing? Or where is this data that you're missing that you're not actually aware that people are failing? It shouldn't be a complete replacement. It isn't necessarily cheap to start off with. You do have to purchase a load of new hardware. But these days, it's another tool within your toolbox. These can be reused and repurposed with a variety of different applications. And as time moves on, it will become more interoperable with your existing training systems. But until we have IT and security and procurement and everybody else on board, then getting that data off a headset that made standalone into your learning record systems, currently, there's ways that additional steps that have to be taken. But I think we've been doing this for 10 years now, and we've heard it consistently. But 10 years later, I think we can confidently say, VR isn't a gimmick or a fad. Now, I referenced over 100 experiences that we've deployed. So I've chosen 4 for the purposes of this presentation. And we have the first case study, which is essentially what we call early mixed reality. It has a blend of a 15-meter parabolic screen with projected content, live actors, and then live site assets like huts and telephone cables. And this is based in Coventry and also Melbourne. And since operation in 2014, they've been tracking a 90% reduction of on-site incidents of people who've been going through this training. And then indirectly, a 10% increase in the overall quality of construction projects and a 5% reduction of the overall cost of construction projects. Now, this was deployed before VR hit the mainstream, or well, the current wave was more accessible. These are a few £1 million in terms of installation, whereas now we're talking about a couple of £1,000 for a PC and a headset. But this does allow shared VR experience, essentially, for much higher volumes to go through. A more recent one, we've been working with CITB on a couple of projects. And this one brings me a lot of joy just because it's been with Tunnel Skills, and they've been aggressively rolling it out through schools throughout the UK, and tunneling apprenticeship colleges to ensure that people have a new way of understanding the life of working down tunnels. It's a suite of apps. Some of it is 3D real time, some of it is 360 video. Aspects are, some of it is just stories from people who are actually doing the job. And the focus here is on the health and safety risk assessment and the processes of life and work underground. Now, not everyone has access to a VR headset, and to widen scale, we've made it available as a web-based experience. And then working with CITB, who are partially funded by a levy from all the construction companies each year, these applications are now available through the Oculus App Lab store, free, for anyone who has a Quest or a Quest 2 VR device. And they've been doing a tour, as I say, last year and this year. And every week they are sharing more and more photos of people getting into tunneling and understanding what is involved, to encourage them to get into the construction industry. A slight change of track is when we started working with standalone headsets that don't need a PC. There was an initial technical issue where we couldn't see what was going on in the headset. More traditional VR headsets with a PC have a monitor that mirrors what the person in the headset is seeing. This made training facilitation quite difficult. So we originally created this system that simply, via an offline Wi-Fi connection, streamed the content of the headset to a laptop. And then talking with our development partner, Keltbray, we then worked out that actually there's a use case here where if we're also recording the person who's doing the training along with the learning objectives and their learner ID, creating this irrefutable video learner evidence, there's a piece of video footage here that will provide competence and a record of that competence, but at the same time, should an on-site incident occur and any court cases come about, then there is this evidential statement that the person named on paper as doing the training is actually the person who's done the training. So what we do is we take the footage from the webcam of the laptop of the person doing the training, plus the output from the VR headset, with a timeline of all of the learning objectives for the VR training as they're being completed. And this is a single composite of a video feed. With pandemic and people not being able to be in the same room, or not have so many people in the same room, this also could then be live streamed remotely. So facilitator and learner didn't have to be in the same room together. And ultimately, this package has now gone on to be used across all of Keltbray's main London sites. We have 3 packages of training content specifically that incorporate it, and it works as a third-party integration with other VR tools. But it allows you to have that video and text record of the competency. This can be reviewed and scrubbed back through at the end of the training session, so the learner can see where they've gone wrong. So we have traffic marshalling, slinger signaller, and reversing vehicles currently. And then quickly, the last one is another review, also training tool, where through augmented reality tablets and VR headsets, you can, sort of in a multi-user way, you can plan and rehearse construction projects and programs and view all the various aspects of a site that you need to take consideration in terms of how far the crane boom arm swings out. Do you have enough room within the stadium to operate safely? And then this has been tied into Skill Shield so that you can create your own custom training programs within this. And using the HoloLens, you can then bring one-to-one life-size assets onto your construction site to sort of plan and prepare to make sure you've got enough room on site. And that's pretty much me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sam. That's brilliant. I mean, it's just amazing the diversity of projects that Make Real have been able to contribute to over the last few years. So real kind of eclectic mix there. Thank you ever so much. I'm going to whiz on through so we don't eat up too much people's afternoons. Next up, I'm absolutely delighted that we've got Mark Enzer, who is the Chief Technology Officer at Mott MacDonald, joining us. Not only has Mark been, of course, pursuing a whole number of projects through Mott MacDonald, he's also been heavily involved in a lot of UK national programs and initiatives around digital twins. And I'll let Mark share a whole load more on that. So with that, welcome, Mark. I will stop sharing and allow you to take control of the screen as well, please. Fantastic. Wonderful. All right, thank you.
Can I just double check that you can see that?
Yep, all good.
Yeah, super, super. Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be invited, and I thought absolutely excellent examples from Sukhmit and Sam. So I'm really glad to follow them, actually, because one of the things I'd like to do is take a little bit of a step back and look at some of the context for this thing we have in front of us, the whole idea of construction reimagined. So what I propose to do quite quickly is to think about construction reimagined, firstly, as part of a bigger picture. I'd like to set some context. Where does construction fit? But then also to reimagine construction as something cyber-physical, where the physical world meets the digital worlds. And then maybe to come down to earth a little bit at the end and to be considering how the transformation can actually happen in a real way, because that's kind of what we have to do in construction. It has to become real. So to start with a bigger picture, take a big step back and consider the whole of our built environment and what is it for. This document that came out about a year ago, a shared document that was supported by about 40 cross-sector organizations, outlined a vision for the whole built environment. And something that I thought was really good about this was that it showed our built environment as having purpose. The vision was about the built environment having an explicit purpose to enable people and nature to flourish together for generations. And it kind of recognized that it's only if we shift our focus from creating the built environment to looking at the outcomes that are enabled by it, that people and nature can flourish together. And so I think it's really helpful to have that in mind. The built environment with a purpose, that purpose being about enabling people and nature to flourish together. And it helpfully put the built environment across as a system of systems. We've got the built systems that I guess we're familiar with and we think about maybe in terms of construction, but also the interface with natural systems and then the interface with cyber physical systems. And you stick all of that together and you get this amazing system of systems that we live within and that we can use to drive better outcomes. And something, again, helpfully built on top of that, we're seeing the processes that are really relevant across the whole built environment. Now, clearly, construction is a very, very important process in this, but it's not the only one. There's all sorts of other stuff going on. Maybe the most important is the use of the built environment. And then, of course, we have to operate and maintain it to make it available for use. And then every now and again, we need some new assets. And that's when we kick off the planning and the designing and the building and the commissioning. And so we can then see our construction as part of a bigger picture, and part of a bigger picture that really matters matters because it leads to these better outcomes for people and society and nature. So I think this is a hugely important context, is to see that construction is massively important, but it's part of a bigger thing. And we can see our projects in construction really as interventions on the system. Now, the reason for outlining this, I hope will come clearer later on in the presentation. But just to emphasize that this isn't just highfalutin kind of visionary stuff. It's built into policy now. And so I would really commend this to you if you haven't seen it already, Transforming Infrastructure Performance Roadmap to 2030. And it builds in this idea of an outcomes focus, of recognizing the systems, of understanding how important information flows are through that, seeing that if we can get that information flow right, it means we can make better decisions driving towards better outcomes. And so I think having that bigger vision actually leads to something really practical, and it enables us to see that these interventions do really matter, but as part of a bigger picture. And a key enabler to get us to that point is about going cyber-physical. It's recognizing the value of these digital worlds that we kind of have access to through XR, and kind of recognizing that the metaverse is a real thing. You know, it's the sum of all the digital worlds, and we can do something at the useful end of the metaverse. And to get there, we need to do some digital transformation. But that digital transformation is really all about enabling people. It's got something important to do about managing information better, to make better decisions. That's kind of key to unlocking the value. But it's also about transforming the processes that we see across the built environment, and also applying and integrating technology wisely. So that's a big picture kind of context where XR kind of fits into construction, where construction fits into the built environment. And I think that this kind of integrative picture really helps us to get the best out of technology, because technology without a purpose is just a toy. And I think at the heart of it, kind of starting now to kind of dig into my second piece, talking about cyber-physical in construction, is to recognize how very important information is, because information is really the carrier of value. Lots of people complain about there being just too much data around the place. And what I'd argue is maybe there's too much data, but there's too little insight. And what we have to do is take our data, do something clever with it to generate insight, use that insight to make better decisions. The better decisions drive better interventions, and the better interventions lead to better outcomes. So this value chain, this information value chain, is super important. And we can see in things like digital twins how this information value chain is effectively embodied to deliver better outcomes. And so with a digital twin, you've basically got the physical thing, you've got a digital version of the physical thing, you've got a data connection which connects them up. But then within the digital world, you generate the insight, make those better decisions, drive the better interventions. And what I think is really nice and kind of really helpful when we look at digital twins and their use in the built environment is seeing how they're not really a technology, but a means of integrating technology. And I guess this is one of my main themes. It's not one technology alone, it's how we integrate technology wisely. And so we can see across this picture, lots of different technology being used and integrated. So the sensor technology, and by the way, this is going to be technology buzzword bingo going on here. And you can see how getting the data into the digital world, it's all IoT and 5G. Once it's in the digital world, trying to make sense of it is AI and ML. And then for humans to have a look in and see what on earth's going on, to understand it all, that's where we need our AR, VR, MR. Because we humans are visual creatures, so we need to visualize what's going on inside the digital twin to help us make the better decisions to drive the better interventions. And so I guess the only one that I've left off here is blockchain, but we can easily see where that comes in, helping to have to kind of build trust into data exchanges. So what we see with digital twins is really that they are cyber-physical systems. They're joining physical and digital together. And then we can imagine beyond that. So individual digital twins, you can see that they could pop up all over the place. A digital twin for a train and track and signaling. And in the real world, those are joined up physically. But then we can imagine how you can join up the digital twins and federate them. And yes, we need visualization for that as well. And so I guess what I'm trying to put across here is the context within which XR becomes so very valuable. We need to have a way of looking into those digital worlds and making the connection between the digital and physical worlds is a route to unlocking a huge amount of value and getting that flourishing that we want from our built environment. And when we add it all together, back up to the system level, we can see how these many different digital twins can be federated, can be joined together as part of a wider cyber physical infrastructure to help us understand our systems better and intervene more effectively. Now, that really matters at a system level because an awful lot of the challenges we face just now are system level challenges, like achieving net zero, like achieving climate resilience, like achieving circular economy. All of these are system level challenges that demand systems-based solutions. So we have to see how things join up. And we can see, therefore, how XR fits into this, but fits into a bigger picture of technology that is integrated with a purpose, and that purpose really matters. And so on my systems point, just to emphasize that the design build commission is a really important part of the overall picture, but it's just part. It's like seeing the system, seeing the interventions on system. Okay, so let's get a little bit more practical for just a moment and talk about how on earth do you get this transformation to actually happen? And there's a real important why here, because pretty much every other industry has been increasing in productivity for a long, long time, but our industry unfortunately hasn't. So what do we have to do to get it up to where everything else is? Certainly part of the answer is digitalization. It's not the whole answer, and digitalization isn't a thing in itself. It's always an enabler of something else that's more important, but digitalization matters. And we can definitely see where XR fits into this. I thought I'd chuck in a few examples, because otherwise it's just highfalutin stuff. And you can see extended reality and machine guidance, operative training, the site worker augmentation, or kind of verifying quantities on site, some really practical, useful stuff. But like I say, part of a bigger thing. And if we are going to get this transformation to happen across the whole industry, then yes, it's true that we have to push the front edge forwards. We have to keep on doing that. But that's probably a small part of the total that needs to be done, because there's the bulk of the industry that really needs to change. And so what that means is that we need to translate that kind of front edge learning into something that is adoptable. So we need three things. We need to advance the front edge, we need to translate it, and then most importantly, I think, we need to get it actually adopted. And the biggest challenge in the industry really is about adopting the good practice that already exists. And if we look at this, you can see that it's really just a normal distribution curve that is very familiar, where you've got your early adopters and innovators out the front pushing things forwards, including pushing it forwards in XR. But then the actual change in the industry, the thing that's going to unlock the value for the whole industry, is where the kind of the early followers and late followers are. The actual change comes from adopting good practice that already exists. And there is good practice. There's good practice like with the UK BIM framework, which could unlock so much value if it's just adopted more widely. Some very basic things like getting control of our data, being clear on information requirements, working with effective common data environments. All of that will drive genuine change. The Construction Leadership Council is leading in this, which is good, with a data and digital network joining things up across different sectors, but also across the different verticals here, which you can see as part of driving change. There's wonderful initiatives around the place, like what has been driven by the Construction Innovation Hub. If you're not familiar with that, please really do look it up, because there's fantastic stuff coming out relating to how we shift towards more value-based decision making, how information management is kind of at the heart of the change, how you can use advanced manufacturing systems to improve sector productivity, and kind of sharing this internationally. So I've scooted through that really quickly. What I wanted to do was say, overall, there's a big picture. XR fits into something that fits into something else. I wanted to say that this is achievable, but to achieve it, we need to do some basic stuff. Thank you.
Oh, wow, Mark, thank you so much. I think that really does put it into context as to, you know, where we can all go with this as an industry. But you're absolutely right. It needs for more people to start dipping their toe in, and more people to go on that journey and try a proof of value project and see where it gets them. So with that, we've now got 30 minutes left. And what I want to do is to welcome all the speakers and Lucy as well back to video, back to the stage, I was going to say. And we're going to have a little bit more of an open conversation to dig into, I think, some of the topics that have come up. And definitely this is a chance as well, if you as an audience have got some really relevant questions, then please type them into the Q&A, and we'll be monitoring those and should have hopefully 5 or so minutes at the end to tackle a couple of them. So Lucy, over to you. I will stop sharing. Oh, sorry, that might have helped as well. I think you all know who the speakers are now, but I'll stop sharing my screen and we can see all of you and dig a bit deeper. So thanks, Lucy.
Thanks, Emily. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So I think I'm just going to get straight into a few probing questions for you all. So we've heard from all of you today about how you and your organisations are really starting to embrace innovation, but I'd like to know if you think this is reflective of the wider construction sector as well, and if the industry generally is starting to pick up pace when it comes to digitisation, and you know, what is it that we think is actually driving that change? I was thinking, if I could come to you first on this question, how do you think things are looking in the world of design?
Yeah, no, thanks, Lucy. It's a really interesting question, isn't it? Because, as I think has been mentioned, you know, the construction industry does lag behind some of the other sectors in industry, but I think we are seeing a change. We are seeing more technology being leveraged and incorporated into workflows and design processes. One of the reasons, and is definitely due to sort of the global pandemic over the last year and a half or so. Forcing remote working and the likes has really encouraged people to look at technology in a different way, where we've, you know, been able to meet shoulder to shoulder previously. We've been having to be very creative and look outside of the industry in terms of how other people have been engaging in design workshops, in review meetings, and using, you know, the new one that we've started picking up a lot more is sort of the infinite whiteboards, for example, and how they've now become, you know, part of the toolkit for design teams, and where previously it was still whiteboards and pieces of paper and the likes. So we're definitely seeing change come out of necessity, but at the same time, I think it's also with the, I don't want to say younger generation, but with, you know, new people coming into the industry, they're definitely bringing a different mindset and a bit more bravery in terms of trying something new and trying to find new ways of doing things, and knowing that we don't want to be spending our life in Excel. We don't want to be spending our life, you know, doing tedious, repetitive tasks. And so that's definitely driving that change.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, particularly the sort of touching on the maybe sort of cultural change elements that are coming in there as well. I wonder, Mark, if you also have a view on that, maybe from the sort of construction side of thing, and what trends are you starting to see?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I think Sukma is exactly right on the generational thing. And maybe I can say this because I am an old bloke, which probably means I'm part of the problem. But it is clear that that things are changing, and I would say things are speeding up. And one of the things which I think is is really helping this is client leadership, because the supply chain has fantastic things to offer. You know, you've heard some of them this afternoon, but that doesn't work. It doesn't happen unless the clients buy them. And I think that where we see enlightened clients really kind of understanding the benefit of digitalization to themselves, to their projects, but also to the customers at the end of the project, you know, the people who benefit from the improved outcomes. I think that those enlightened clients are helping to drive the change. And I think with organizations like the Infrastructure Client Group, you know, it's a really forward-thinking grouping of the country's leading infrastructure clients, that the kind of client leadership coming from there really helps digital transformation to accelerate. So I'm pretty hopeful about seeing digitalization kind of speeding up, but boy, do we need it.
Great. I mean, that sounds really positive, but we know there are still plenty of things holding us back as an industry as well. Like, so anecdotally, we're hearing issues around affordability, awareness, training, and just that general resistance to the cultural change piece. So I wonder, you know, despite those sentiments, Mark, maybe you could elaborate on some of the barriers as well and what you think those opportunities are to overcome them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's slightly been touched on with the kind of the mention of culture, because certainly what I see is that almost all of the technical solutions are already out there, or you know, we can develop them. On the technology side, I don't think that's what the barrier is. You know, we can sort that. It's going to be fun to sort it, but where I see the barriers are largely to do with human and organizational factors. You know, it's the culture and behavior in the industry. And so I think it's really those that need to be addressed. And the kind of thing that I'm talking about here would be to do with, you know, making sure that we get the ethics right, making sure that there is the upskilling, you know, very human things, because if people don't have the skills, it can't happen. But it's also more than that. It's things like getting in place commercial solutions which allow it, and legal solutions, you know, for data sharing, regulatory solutions. You know, all of these are very human things which can be sorted, but it seems that those are harder in some ways. Like, it's the soft things are harder than the hard things, if that makes sense.
It does. And you mentioned upskilling, so I'm sure, Sam, you'll have a lot to add to this point as well. So I'd love to bring you into the discussion.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's not just upskilling of the future workforce, it's the upskilling of the existing workforce. And to touch upon Mark's point in terms of that hesitance or resistance to adopt technologies, you know, it's very difficult to get a headset on someone. Especially nearly 10 years since they first came back on. People think they know VR, and they've probably had a previously poor experience. But you know, ultimately, it comes down to standards. You know, the construction industry is built around standards and processes, and we are still at the point where how to upskill and how to train and how to ensure that all of the future immersive contents are conveying and training and creating the assessments of those standards effectively. We need to have that wide-ranging cooperation between the organizations who are setting the standards, the companies who are actually building and incorporating them, but also us technical lot who are, you know, looking to build the future of the training contents to make sure that they are on point.
Great. Another question that I had was around where you think the biggest impact might be felt across the life cycle of construction by adopting immersive technology. Would this be the planning and design side, construction, or sort of optimizing operational efficiencies once a building's actually there? So yeah, maybe I'll come to you first on this one.
Yeah, thank you, Lucy. It's an interesting one. I want to say that the biggest impact is during that design phase, that early planning stage. But I think, you know, looking at the life cycle of a building from a sort of, as Mark was saying earlier, you know, when you step back from it, you know, a building, most of its life is spent being built and used and operated. And I think if we can be in a place where we can use technology to make sure that it's as efficient as possible, being used in the best way as possible, and if it can actually reduce the need for building a new building. And, you know, connecting this back to retrofit, and, you know, with a big drive on net zero at the moment, you know, they're the opportunities that we need to look for. And that's where technology can definitely come into its own in supporting those types of challenges. So that, you know, as much as we all want to create new things and build the best buildings and so forth, it's also, like I said, you know, making sure that we're making the most of what we've already got, and reducing that overarching sort of impact on the environment, and taking it from there. So I think that we've got a huge opportunity in using VR, XR to how we operate a building, connecting it to digital twins, looking at operation cycles, you know, looking at how we can simulate different scenarios of what that building could be used for in the first 5 years, then 10 years after that, you know, whether it's an office space that goes to retail, that goes to education, you know, is that even a possibility, and how can XR and immersive tech support that journey and support that option moving forward.
Great, yeah, and I totally agree with you. It's the old saying of the greenest building is one that's already built. Yeah, Sam, maybe I'll come to you with the same question to get your take.
Yeah, sure. I mean, in terms of the particular opportunities, you know, Mark mentioned metaverse and digital twins, and metaverse is obviously a big buzzword at the moment. What it actually means is yet to be defined, but to go back to Sukhmit's point about, it's not just designing beautiful future buildings and how we live within them. It's also, once we have all this data and feed it into the simulation and into the models, we can better understand our existing world, to see how it currently impacts us and how we can enhance it cost effectively. So I think ultimately, you know, once we have more data out there, and once we're taking that data from the variety of sensors, and feeding it into the models, whether we call it the metaverse or the mirror world, etc., then this is going to be the future. But ultimately, it's still, these various companies have seen these small prototypes, small proofs of concepts, and we actually need to understand what those measurable impacts and benefits are of incorporating them on a much wider scale to bring much more super data sort of into the picture.
Yeah, data definitely key. I would love to bring the discussion, a bit selfishly maybe, to my favourite topic, sustainability, if I may. So we at UKGBC launched our Whole Life Carbon Roadmap last year at COP, which highlighted the UK built environment sector being directly responsible for 25% of total UK greenhouse gas emissions. And that's just through sort of buildings and infrastructure. And it then rises to 42% if we include surface transport in that scope. So the construction industry clearly has this huge role to play if we're going to achieve net zero by 2050. And I'd really like to hear about what digital changes you think are key to helping drive the sector towards net zero. I think I'll probably come to Mark first, because I'm sure you've got a lot of insight into the power, particularly of digital twins in supporting that aim.
Yeah, thank you very, very much. I mean, I think that this is probably the challenge of our age, actually, because it is so important, so huge. You know, this is the thing that we all have to pull together on, and yeah, and make sure that we crack it, because otherwise, that thing I talked about right at the beginning, you know, the people and nature flourishing together for generations. You know, that doesn't happen if we don't sort out net zero. You know, this is the big thing that we got to sort out. And what I feel is hugely important in this space is the systems thinking. You just cannot solve net zero in silos. I think that's abundantly obvious, isn't it? It needs to be connected up. We need to know how things connect with each other, and we need system solutions. And I would have to say that it's not just net zero. I mean, it is also climate resilience is in the same place. So is circular economy. And if we can sort out circular economy, that helps with net zero. You know, these things are all connected, but it means that we now must grapple with systems thinking. And yes, I do think that's where digital twins come in, because digital twins help us to understand systems better and to intervene more effectively. You know, and I think in some ways it's really fortunate that at the same time as this big systemic challenge comes along, so do some of the answers. Because 20 years ago we couldn't have used digital twins in the way we can now. You know, it's very fortunate that we have these tools at hand, but we have to use them. And I think that you know, one of the biggest issues in this, in order to have the proper systems thinking and to enable digital twins along the lines that I was talking about, is actually to do with interoperability. Because you can't do systems thinking if everyone is in a silo, each kind of working with their own data in their own way. So interoperability becomes the big challenge here, and it means we do need to work out how to federate. And I think what that fundamentally means is that we, across the industry, we need to have consistent, high-quality data models, and we need to have shared reference data. That's simple. I can say it in less than 10 seconds. We have to do that. That's what the industry has to do. Otherwise, we can't do systems thinking. And if we can't do systems thinking, then we can't sort out net zero.
Yeah, I agree. And talking of systems thinking, collaborative thinking, I wanted to commit. Do you have any sort of response or additions you wanted to chip in there?
Yeah, I think it's just reiterating that point around systems thinking, but and also it's making sure we start right, as Mark was saying. And Sam, you've also mentioned it earlier around getting our foundations right, getting our data in a good place so that we can actually leverage it and utilize it. One of Mark's slides earlier was, we've got an abundant amount of data, but a lack of insights. What are we actually using it for, and what's the purpose of it? And so I think there's this element of us having to, we know it's a big challenge, and we've sort of got to have that responsibility of actually taking it step by step as well. So there's bite-sized chunks, because there's pockets of excellence going on where we've proven one part or two parts, once again, but it's still in those siloed aspects. We've proven 1 point of a 10-point plan, and it's how we then as an industry work together, and beyond our industry as well, to actually bring that all together so that we can actually reach the goal that we're all achieving, that we all want to achieve. So it's definitely going to be around that collaboration, definitely around sharing and sense of community and a sense of responsibility as well across the industry, that actually every time you're from a designer's perspective, every time you're designing something, there is an impact you're having, and you want to try and make sure it's the right type of impact, a positive impact towards this industry and global, and national and global challenge we've got around net zero.
Thank you. And leads quite nicely into the next question I'd like to ask, because I believe that we have quite a few startups and scale-ups in our audience today. So for all of our innovators out there in the audience, I'd like to get our speakers' view on what they think are still some of the big gaps in the market that we need when it comes to digital innovation that you might be able to help fill. So Sam, maybe I'll come to you first.
Sure. I think at the moment, some of the gaps are, it's essentially there's a lot of siloed attempts to create answers to problems that haven't necessarily been fully fleshed out or fully understood. And in terms of the benefits of these particular use cases that aren't necessarily conveyed. So, and how it all gels and sticks together and works together. It's that level of interoperability and standards that I was talking about earlier, rather than trying to encourage organizations to adopt all these standalone individual little pieces that don't necessarily talk to each other. We need that centralized layer that connects everything, because once the data flows freely, then applications can start using it and making it much more effective, rather than either repeating itself, inflating the amount of data we have to deal with, or doubling the workload, or costs associated with buying two things that do the same thing, essentially.
Yeah, Mark, would you sort of agree with that?
I completely agree with that. Yeah, like absolutely. I was thinking, where can I write +1? Sam absolutely cracked it as far as I was concerned. I totally agree. I mean, I think what that points to is actually that there's some really hard work that needs to be done, some kind of foundational work that is kind of boring housekeeping kind of stuff that isn't going to get many people excited, because people will get excited about kind of the new shiny tech. But the new shiny tech, which we need, by the way, so everyone out there who's inventing new shiny tech, please keep doing that. We need it. But in order to get this interoperability that we're saying is so important, there needs to be some really boring, under the surface foundational work to be done to enable that interoperability. And the kind of thing I'm talking about here is establishing ontologies, and making sure that one person's taxonomy can be translated to somebody else's taxonomy, and those kind of things really need to be done, but they don't get many people excited, and therein lies a bit of a problem. Because you want the shiny stuff, but we need the housekeeping done, and that housekeeping is generally to do with making sure that our data is properly usable and transferable. The whole interoperability issue. So I completely agree with Sam, and I think what it for me points to as kind of some of the work that needs to be done is that foundational hard work on ontologies and taxonomies and foundation data models.
Brilliant. Isn't it nice when everyone agrees? Great. I'm going to ask a quick sort of wrap-up question, because I do want to leave a little bit of time for audience questions. I think sort of summarize some of the discussions we've had this afternoon. If we throw the challenges of business transformation that we've been discussing into just 3 buckets: technical, cultural, regulatory, which would you consider to be the biggest and most important barrier to address? And who is it that has the biggest role to play in doing that? And I'd like to hear from everybody. So maybe if we come to Sam first, and then I'll move to Mark and then Sikmit to wrap up.
Sure. I think from the technological side of things, it's always, after 10 years, my favorite thing is still putting a headset on someone and them experiencing XR for the first time. And I think, this is still very much a case of, we have 6 or 7 out of 10 people who still haven't tried it. So there's a massive opportunity there to enable people to understand the potential use cases and the benefits. And as I said in my talk, I can talk till the cows come home about XR, but you're not really going to understand it unless I can put a headset on you for 20 seconds and you'll get it. So I think some of the opportunities there, in terms of most exciting areas, are going to be that continued expression and people sharing what they're working on beyond just here's a house in 3D. It's like, what can you actually do with that house, and beyond just putting a headset on someone, these additional senses and experiences to make you really feel as if you are in that house, but not in a really dystopian way that we forget that we are actually in a house or a building somewhere else that is decaying and escaping to a virtual world.
Mark?
Yeah, I think in 2 words for me, the big ones would be cultural, and then the kind of the answer to that would be the clients and client leadership. So I guess that answers the question, but just to expand it a little bit, I think that going forwards, it's really all about connections. We talked about integration, federation, interoperability. It's all about making connections, and that needs leadership. And the barriers to it are generally cultural. And so I think it's important that we see this whole thing we're talking about actually as socio-technical change. If we think it's just technical, we'll miss the important bit. But it is partly technical. So let's call it socio-technical change and agree that and move forwards.
Final words, Sikmit.
Brilliant. Love that term, Mark. I think it really does reinforce something I've got in my head around this sort of stuff as well, is that our industry is driven by people. So as much as the tech, the processes are amazing and cutting edge and game changing, it's still a people-driven industry, and they need to be put front and center in terms of how we use this technology, adopt these processes, and are enabled to make those better decisions, those informed decisions, so that we can keep moving forward. And it does need leadership. It needs the boring stuff done. But it's sort of like you need to look at it from the two bookends. And actually, it's this cultural change, the technical change, the people change that has to happen in the middle that will enable all this to go. And it is a mixing pot. We've talked about collaboration, sharing, community, all of these words. So the closer we start bringing all those connections and those silos, the more value we'll start seeing, and faster. And we'll keep getting better at it, and we can start reacting to change a lot better moving forward as well. So everyone's got a role to play, and it just goes down to us having a clear focus in terms of what we want to achieve as an industry, and keep making steps towards it.
Thank you. Right, I've got a few minutes for some audience questions. One that's got a bit of upvoting going on around it, a bit technical. For a new construction project, is content generation for AR or VR the biggest part of the development, or is there another factor? So if you want to do a sort of hands up for who might like to take that on. No time to think, that's okay. Not sure.
Yeah, I can sort of start it off, hopefully. I think it is a big player in terms of sort of the content and having to generate it. At the same time, though, we were just speaking about collaboration and community. There's also there's loads of resources out there in terms of to kickstart that. And actually, sometimes the challenge isn't about the content. The challenge is around making sure the platform and what you're trying to achieve is clear. So, why are you using this piece of tech? What do you actually want to achieve out of it? And actually putting the effort into that element of it can actually make the rest of the development and implementation a lot easier, because you're not getting distracted. You're not having to answer questions as you go along. And there's that clarity of how you want to move forward. So from my side, I would say actually, while it doesn't sound time consuming, being clear on what the problem statement is and what you want to achieve has a lot more value than just thinking about the tech or the content and that element of it.
Yeah, I think from a sort of production point of view, taking an existing BIM model and adapting it isn't always a huge amount of work, but as it says, it comes down to what is the actual purpose of the use case of what you're going to be doing with those models, and what are going to be the end devices. There are ways of streaming high density models to standalone devices, which are essentially fairly recent mobile chipsets. Or there are ways of having a much higher end PC in a more traditional tethered VR setup, if that is the purpose. If it's just a quick review, then there's a variety of quick and dirty tools these days for using LiDAR to capture existing sites or buildings, photogrammetry, quickly sticking photos together in the cloud and returning you a 3D model. Is it for review, or is it for actually determining that whether what you're building has been, millimeter precise in terms of the model to the actuality? But ultimately, once you have those models, it's like film, it's like anything, anything digital. The higher the quality you start off with, you can gracefully degrade down to a variety of lesser optimized, more optimized, lesser fidelity versions, and you're not having to reinvent or remodel every single time. Our clients EDF 6 years ago, we created 3D models or took their 3D models of HPC, for example, and we still use those today in a variety of use cases across a variety of devices. And they don't have to pay us to remodel every single time we want to create something else around HPC.
Great. Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining our panel discussion today. I think I'd better hand over to David to give us a quick wrap up.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'm going to welcome, thank you so much, first of all, Lucy, and thank you to all of the panelists there and for spending your time speaking today. I'm very quickly just going to hand over to my colleague, David Pugh, who's just going to wrap up as final few notes from today. But in advance, thank you all for joining. Go on then, David, over to you.
Thanks, Emily. Hi, everyone. My name is David Pugh, and I'm the head of sustainability at Digital Catapult. I just wanted to kind of summarize the excellent session we've just had and all of the interesting conversations that have been had and the things we've learned. And we started, 90 minutes ago with Lucy telling us about all the ways in which the UK Green Building Council works with the construction industry and the built environment to understand challenges and to enable faster uptake within industry. And then Sukrit talked to us about how immersive technologies are not just limited to headsets. There's a lot that goes far beyond wearing a headset. There's things you can do with phones, with tablets, with QR codes, and how these technologies are really a tool for conversation, story, and narrative. And that goes far beyond just 3D visuals. We then moved on to Sam, who talked to us about VR training. And what I found really interesting was that data retention is so much more effective for long-term data recall using virtual reality than traditional methods. We've all been through hours and years of PowerPoint. So finding new ways to get this information out is really useful. And then we also looked at the whole spectrum of VR and immersive training, from early mixed reality that had real actors and real infrastructure in place, all the way through to remote live streaming of training, which is really fascinating. And then we finished off with Mark talking to us about cyber physical systems and how to get the best out of technology, not just in terms of a single asset, but from those federated digital twins that brought together all sorts of different cyber physical systems, and also just how important information is. And it's not just data, but it's what you do with that data and how you use the insights that can be generated. And we finished off with a fantastic and really fascinating panel session. We talked about cultural change, what the barriers to adoption are, how we can look at system thinking and the viability of these technologies, how they can enable a sustainable future, and really that this isn't just a technology industry. This is a people-driven industry, and the technology exists today and is there now. The next piece for us all, and the next opportunity, is using that technology to really drive change. Now, I don't want to leave you empty, with nowhere to go after this. So there's a few events coming up that I wanted to make you aware of. So on the 24th of February, you can join UKRI on their mission to transform construction. So this is a showcase to mark the finale of the 4-year Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund's Transforming Construction Programme. This will go through a whole host of Innovate UK funded programs that have looked at every aspect of the built environment, found really interesting ways with companies of all sizes across the UK of making UK construction kind of world leading. And then at the end of March, you'll be able to join the Startup Showcase for Digital Catapult's Future Scope Industrial Net Zero Acceleration Programme. This is where Digital Catapult have worked with 40 of the UK's most interesting and innovative companies in construction, but also in other industries like food and drink, energy, textiles, looking at how digital technologies are really driving a sustainable future. And you can visit futurescope.digitalcatapult.org.uk to find out more. And that really brings us to the end of today's webinar. I'd like to thank Emily and all of the panelists for their discussions. If you'd like to know more, Digital Catapult is there, and we do exist to support innovation journeys. So please do get in touch with us. Details are on the screen now. These slides and recordings will be available in the next couple of days. But thank you for your time. I hope you found this session really useful, and look forward to speaking to you about these things in the future.